This is the story of how one passenger turned first class into first ass, into first gas. You know what? You guys were right. That is a missed opportunity. Anyways, welcome to the debrief. Alright everyone, let's gather around. Welcome to the debrief of this video. Alright, so in this debrief I'm going to be answering some major questions that I received, as well as some other major talking points and some statements regarding the video. I guess you can call them artist statements because, to be fair, that's what I do in real life. But that's TMI, let's get started. The San Juan Dilemma. Why take the 4-hour trek to JFK despite several better alternatives? The big one being San Juan, but I also saw a couple comments mentioning Miami as another option on the table. Well, as stated in the video, but also this is a direct quote from the news article that I used extensively, unscheduled landings with a head of state on board is a security risk. Also, even if Miami was considered an option, I couldn't find any records or any articles that stated that the pilots proceeded to then contact other ATCs outside of San Juan with the specific request for an emergency landing. In fact, the Aluminum 2 podcast, which is the podcast that you can hear in the intro, the whole Jerry makes history part, well, that podcast just straight up says that the pilots fucked up.
The pilots do not declare an emergency, and this is where I'm going to fault the pilots. The pilots don't declare an emergency. The pilots, instead, they request that air traffic control allow them to land at the closest airport that the airline serves, which is San Juan, Puerto Rico. So they're halfway over San Juan.
However, that doesn't change the fact that the pilots still intended to divert to San Juan, and moreover, the captain knew the situation in the back to then instruct the flight attendants about what to do. That does contradict what I said in the video, however, when I said that the pilots prepared for an emergency landing. We know that the pilots were intending to divert, but if a couple sources claim that, and then another source just straight up says that the pilots were not gonna, do an emergency landing, we're kind of at a crossroads here. And unfortunately, I can't give you a concrete answer because we don't know the pilots, and more importantly, we don't have testimony from the pilots. So, my apologies if I did indeed lie, but also, that's quite concerning given that, a passenger just created a biohazard right in front of a bunch of people's eyes. Also, some of you guys wondered how San Juan could give such authority in the first place. Well, that's because 976 was given priority handling because they were moving a head of state.
Prior to departure, the airline filed for a priority handling request. So the controllers would not allow the airplane to land because they had foreign dignitaries on board and they were concerned that it was a security risk to let the airplane land in San Juan because the security was set up for their destination JFK.
With all that being said, who was responsible for making these men fly with a commercial airline instead of, I don't know, a chartered flight? The bathroom part. Why couldn't they lock Jerry in the bathroom for the remainder of the flight? Because at some point, this plane needs to end up on the ground, which means that this plane needs to be configured both externally and internally. And part of that internal configuration is fastening people in their seats, not a first-class bathroom. The last thing that these flight attendants needed was Jerry hurting himself, and locking him up in an airplane bathroom during landing would have likely done the trick. Now, would I have been in favor of Jerry being inside the stall? Yes, but that's also why I'm not a flight attendant, obviously. Susan Bergen. So in this story, we've got several important characters. Jerry, obviously, Guido, Mario, Sharon, Stillman. But real quick, I need to dedicate some time to Susan Bergen. I can only imagine how Susan felt watching her colleague go on such a rampage. The amount of secondhand embarrassment she must have obtained had to have been as strong as Jerry's stench. But for her to then help the rest of the crew unlock the door to get Jerry out, and then to quote a fellow commenter, but taking one for the team and effectively calming Jerry down by sleeping against his soiled self, I truly hope that Susan got something big out of this, and more importantly, never flew with Jerry ever again, because I certainly wouldn't. Also, on the subject of unheralded characters, I also want to mention Dennis Manskar, Sharon's husband, because he actually had one of the proverbial best seats in the house, because Dennis was actually seated in the same row as Jerry, and also saw the altercation of Jerry threatening to bust a flight attendant's ass firsthand. I could only imagine what the conversation between the Manskars must have been when they came back to their home after this flight, and actually, what's even crazier is that according to the New York Daily News article that I used, the Manskars actually lived minutes away from Jerry's home. Now granted, minutes could mean 5 minutes to 30 minutes, but the fact that they are in a close enough vicinity that it has to be mentioned in this article, I mean, if you want to talk about how small this world is, there you go. Jerry's Alzheimer's. Jerry's inevitable demise, him dying of Alzheimer's 9 years after 9/76, got a lot of you guys talking about how Alzheimer's, particularly early onset Alzheimer's, might have played a role in Jerry's behavior. And yeah, fair, it is absolutely not an excuse for what he did, but it also adds a layer of nuance and depth that kind of explains why Jerry did some very disgusting, inexcusable stuff. However, let me counter by saying that first, I have no idea if Jerry even knew that he had Alzheimer's. In fact, I don't even know how Jerry was as a person prior to 9/76. According to his obituary, he had a long tenure in the Air Force prior to him working in business and finance. He also had no notable cases of abhorrent behavior prior to 9/76, so again, one could assume he was, in the words of his lawyer, marvelously decent. But speaking about his lawyer, if Jerry knew that he had Alzheimer's, wouldn't he have then told his lawyer about his condition? Obviously that's a sensitive topic, but also, that just seems like a pretty big piece of information to just tell, so that his lawyer could craft some form of defense for him in the realm of altered mental states or something like that. Granted, I'm not a lawyer, I don't know anything about law, but that also just seems like a pretty obvious thing to do if he was given that type of information. However, what good old Charlie actually crafted for his defense was that Jerry was suffering from traveler's diarrhea, and that the flight attendants failed to attend his medical emergency, confidently denying that alcohol was a factor, and more importantly, not mentioning anything related to an altered mental state, Alzheimer's, any of that. In fact, none of the articles that I found that related to the subsequent trials mentioned those things either. Which means that either A, he might have had it when this flight happened, he just straight up didn't know, therefore no one else knew, or B, he just didn't have it. Legitimacy. Let me first start off by saying that this flight did in fact take place. This case of air rage did indeed happen. This isn't like the Polybius of air rage incidents, more like the Wilt 100-point game of air rage incidents. I'm saying this mainly because yes, I got the occasional "Oh my god! This can't be real," but also comments like this one saying that my video was one big lie because I mentioned that Jerry was pouring himself a glass. I'm assuming this commenter is referring to the numerous instances where I mentioned that Jerry was self-serving, which that person said didn't make sense, therefore this video doesn't make sense, therefore fuck you. Now granted, that could have been a lie, therefore I might have lied, but you know who else would have lied? The numerous flight attendants and other passengers on this flight that stated that Jerry was serving himself some drinks. That includes Sharon, that includes Dennis, that includes some other unnamed flight attendants, and that also includes this official document that relayed the events of this flight, in which it also states that Jerry was serving beverages to himself. And by the way, most if not all the statements that I used from witnesses or the flight attendants, most if not all of them came from this New York Daily News article that was basically one of the very few sources that detailed a timeline of events with witness accounts. This article was also written on November the 2nd, 1995, so these statements were made while the flight was still relatively fresh in everyone's mind. So yeah, what Jerry did on this flight, from giving himself waterfalls to spewing out waterfalls, all of that happened.
Chocolate rain, the the school books say it can't be here again.
Alright, so let's talk about the chocolate sequence while you guys actually see the chocolate sequence. Here it is in all of its glory right here. Initially, I wanted this thing to be like an animated sequence of Jerry, you know, doing it in front of first class. Because as you can see, like here, this is just, you know, intro and lead up that just builds to the climax, which of course is Jerry, you know, doing it, dumping it all over first class. And maybe an animation would have worked, but I also just think that it would have been too hard and too grotesque. And so as a result, the chocolate sequence came to mind basically because it just felt simple enough to actually do. And also the actual sequence itself being done to the backdrop of Ave Maria, I just felt like classical music was like the best type of music for this. It felt right to use like a slow, intricate piece like Ave Maria, specifically Hitman Blood Money's Ave Maria, which by the way is the best rendition of Ave Maria. Also, I'm really glad a lot of you guys appreciated and more importantly recognized the Ace Combat briefing thing that I used for the transition up to Cleaning Ass, which is, you know, the direct aftermath of all of this stuff. Ace Combat music runs a lot in this channel and it's not going to stop, so don't fret. This is definitely not going to be the last time you're going to hear Ace Combat music on this channel, because let's be honest with ourselves here, Ace Combat music in general is some of the greatest video game music out there. Alright, let's finish off this debrief with a couple other small little questions that I'm going to answer right now. I guess we'll call this the rapid fire section, I don't really know. Was there HIV or AIDS testing post-flight? No idea. However, Sharon did mention in the New York Daily News article that I used that she wanted those type of tests to be done. Is this plane still flying? Probably? Possibly? The registration of this actual airplane is unknown. However, according to this post from r/aviation that relates to UA976, United has only got rid of 3 767-300s. You can see the reasons as to why. On a similar note, the actual flight number itself, that was still in use post Jerry. Where did all the fecal material come from? I don't really know if Jerry spewed as much special sauce as I implied with the chocolate montage. However, according to the Aluminum 2 podcast episode, apparently Jerry did eat a meal as well as drinks. So you can imagine the first class meal, but still airplane food. And combine that with the copious amounts of drinks. Maybe Jerry just took a little big dump and then spread it around the place, or maybe it was more worse. Maybe we should stop talking about this right now. And yeah, that's pretty much it for this debrief. I don't really know how to finish off this type of video. Is the Hershey's Cookies and Cream Chocolate Bar the best, and why is the correct answer yes?
Random Father.